And greetings, this is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7. You're listening to the Lansing Online News Radio Show with Bonnie and Bill, as every Monday night at 7 o'clock. You can also catch our webcast at lansingonlinenews.com. There is a nice little embed there, or you can go straight to ustream.tv online and watch the webcast. Good to see you, Bill. You have recovered from the weekend? Life is good?
I don't remember what the weekend was. Oh, I remember what I did. Remember, I watched Go Blue be painted in the sky over MSU Stadium, backwards.
And you found out something fascinating. You thought it was the strangest word you'd ever seen, right?
Right, because it's like looking in a mirror when you're not facing it. So it went right to left, G-O, and then it started looking like a P, JOP. We were going, G-O-P, what is it? And no one could figure it out where I was. And then I went G-O-B, and I went, Go Blue.
Go blue, because it turns out they don't just paint it on the sky the way we thought. It hangs vertically in the air, apparently.
Well, yeah, and the last time I'd seen one was, 50 years ago, probably, maybe longer.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't seen any on the beaches in California and Florida, where it's pretty regular now during spring breaks, I think.
I actually hang out on one of those strange little former militia lists that is very big into chemtrails. So they care a lot about anything they see in the sky. They're persuaded that that's all part of a secret plot to get us,
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, that's what MSU thought. It was a secret plot by somebody from U of M, and they were right. It cost $3,000 to paint Go Blue in the sky.
There's just something about that that offends me.
Somebody's got too much money.
Yes, yes. Must be one of those one percenters. That's all I can figure. It's time for us to claw some of it back now that we're on the 5th anniversary of the big banking crisis and pulling out from that. But if you have any money, there are some things worth doing this weekend. And so you were going to tell us about something. You said you had one announcement you wanted to make?
I wanted to talk about this Thursday, the Historical Society is going to have an author at Capital Area District Library, and he is a Civil War expert. His name is Michael Hoffman, and I'm looking for the title of his book without trying to make too much noise, Bonnie.
It's a very sensitive mic, so
Yeah.
we do have to be careful. Can't tap our fingers, can't do anything. Yes.
Well, we're starting our fall season, and I say that because I am on the Historical Society's board, so I don't want people to know that it's not full disclosure. Okay. The book is called Among the Enemy, a Michigan Soldier's Civil War Journal. And basically what he did is interpreted a Civil War journal kept by a member of the Michigan Mechanics, which were the people that built the things around the war. So once our Union troops would go into an area and destroy everything, he would come along behind it and build it. So it's kind of working behind enemy lines.
Oh, really?
Because everybody was Confederate around him. So it's a different way to look at a piece of history we're learning a lot about because of the 150th anniversary. So that is at 7 p.m. Thursday at Capital Area District Library.
Well, one thing I would like to encourage people to do is coming up tomorrow at noon at 235 South Grand, which is where the Department of Human Services is. There will be a rally of sorts, and it is to try to put a bit of pressure on the family court and on Child Protective Services to return baby Bree to her mother. I have been covering the case of Stephen Maria Green, and Stephen Green has been here on the show talking about the situation where we have an oddity here in Michigan. Despite the fact that we've passed the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, there are counties that have decided that they don't like it, so they're not going to pay much attention to it. And the Greens, unfortunately, lived in Oakland County where that was the case. And when pursuing another criminal, the police discovered that Maria Green had medical marijuana growing at her location. She didn't happen to be home. She ended up getting arrested, and it's led to a consequence of events that the protectionist of the MMA was supposed to prevent. The first thing is that it is supposed to be a default that if you are a caregiver and a patient, you're safe. That clearly is not true. They've been fighting since last January down in the courts in Oakland County. They've yet to have any real hearing on the merits of the case, but it's cost them a lot in legal fees. Along the way, Steve Green, who has severe seizure disorder and was taking 27 different pharmaceuticals in order to control the seizures, has been ordered by the judge, despite not being convicted of anything, not being found guilty of anything, told him he can't take his medical marijuana anymore. So that means he's back on pharmaceuticals that are not controlling his seizures. The Michigan Supreme, the appeals court has decided that cannabis oil, which is the form he was taking in, can no longer be manufactured in the state. So now even if he gets his rights back, he can't take the form of the drug that he needs. And as of last Friday, they used it in a custody case where Maria's ex-husband said he didn't want to let their son come over to the house anymore. And by pursuing that case, it ended up where not only was the young boy prevented from going over to the Green's house and visiting his mother, but they took away her baby daughter that she's breastfeeding, baby Bree. And they put that child into custody, which I think is just an outrage because there is Section 4C of the MMMA Act, which says that absolutely, unless there is some sort of extraordinary other danger, you can't use this in a custody case because it's medicine for caregivers and for patients. And clearly, the referee, when he was rendering his decision, compared the case to a situation 2 years ago where an alleged cocaine dealer had a home invasion and shot his 2-year-old stepdaughter by mistake, and said, well, that proves how dangerous this is. I don't know how you equate an illicit drug operation to a perfectly legal drug operation, but whatever it is, they were only given notice on Friday at 10 a.m. that this was going to happen at 1 o'clock. Their lawyer couldn't even get there in time. He was in another case in Detroit. And it just seems to me a travesty that something like this could happen in this day and age.
What do you think instigated the state getting involved in this? This is the state, or is it a county?
It's the county, and it's a family court, but it's because of a custody case.
Yeah.
You know, the father, the child that Maria
So it's the father that...
the ex-husband doesn't want his son coming over. He had been ordered by the judge based on the MMMA that he had to let the son visit. He didn't like it. So he decided to say to Child Protective Services that it was an unfit home.
And it went to a referee rather than a family court
Because
judge.
all the referee had to find was probable cause, and then it's going to go to a custody hearing. But the reality is that he elected to remove the child from the home until that hearing takes place. So now you have a breastfeeding baby literally ripped from the arms of its mother, which of her mother, which I think is real. I have video up on Lansing Online News that was taken. They had given Maria assurances that she'd be able to ride in the car with the caseworker as the caseworker went the 2.5 hours up to Maria's mother. She was hoping she could stay at her mother's house and continue to breastfeed. And those things turned not to be true. They wouldn't let her in the car. She's screaming and yelling at the back of the car, please let me in. I mean, it's a painful thing to watch. And it concerns me because I thought those protections were built into the law.
Well, I think the thing that we've learned, and I've learned it through all our guests, is the law doesn't mean much.
It's surprising to me. Somebody asked me, how would this happen? And I said, I think what's happening is, based on all my years of working with police, there was a narrative out there that we were the drug warriors. We were the people keeping the rest of society safe. That there are these evil drug lords and we must do everything that we can to battle them. And I do not think they can turn that off overnight. That was still the same narrative that was operating in the decision. I need to protect this child from that kind of violence. Because the referee was saying, well, that anytime there's marijuana in the home, there are robbers there who are going to come in. So I went up and I asked him afterwards, I said, by that logic then, are you going to remove the children from anybody who grows or uses medical marijuana? And he said, well, I won't comment on that. And I said, well, what about other dangerous places? If parents take their kids to a gas station or a bank where people come in with guns, does that mean they lose custody of their children? I mean, it seems to me an illogical argument. Well, he was not very happy with my questions, but I think that's the narrative they've been telling themselves, is that this is the proper way to protect children.
I still haven't been able to find out any details about my neighbor who lives 4 houses down from me that was busted 2 weeks ago.
Oh, no, I don't know
I
about
don't
that.
think he's been charged. They just confiscated 63 plants.
And he says he was legal, or?
He won't talk.
He won't talk.
He won't talk.
Yeah.
He's closed up.
There's a lot of that happening, a lot of raids going on right now, and I guess that was a big surprise to me because, as I said, I started a publication wanting to look at the business of marijuana in Michigan, and just, now with Colorado coming on board and Oregon legalizing recreational marijuana, and instead it's covering all the fact that there's this backlash. The law may have passed a few years ago, but we're seeing quite a backlash from it.
And the other thing, I think even well-meaning judges don't understand marijuana use. Or the science of it. That's kind of the things I picked up. They're making decisions based on information that's 40 years old, 30 years old.
And they still don't see it as medicine. They really don't recognize how valuable that drug can be in terms of certain conditions. So it's going to be a very rocky transition, I think, here in Michigan. There seems to be quite a bit of uproar about it right now. So we'll see what happens tomorrow and what happens in this case. But watching this unfold is difficult at times. So we're going to switch gears again here and move into our All Asia show, right? We are joined by Melissa Anders of MLive, who's recently returned from China, where she was with Governor Snyder's delegation as she visited China. We'll also be joined by Ann Larrabee, who's back from a year-long Fulbright in Japan. So we have two people suffering both residual jet lag and culture shock, and I don't know which is harder to get over. Did you get how was your trip? Tell us, Melissa.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was a brand new experience for me, first time in Asia, and I got to see so much. I saw Beijing, Shanghai, and Chongqing in China, as well as Tokyo, Japan, all in the span of about 12 days.
Ooh. And given the geographic immensity of China, you did quite a bit of traveling in China then too.
Yes, lots of airplanes.
Yeah, yes. Now we were talking earlier that on your first day on the job, when you get there in China, you go to your first panel session, and then you're told that nothing that's said there, it was all supposed to be off the record. I hope it went a little better after that, and you learned all sorts of things we need to know about.
Yep, that was a bit of a shock. That was something to do with the federal State Department that was a little bit wary about me writing on what they had to say about China. To be honest, I didn't think there was anything controversial said, but I know they're very careful about the U.S.-China relationship there. From then on, I had pretty good access, I would say. Sat in on a lot of meetings and events and dinners between both Governor Snyder and Chinese and Japanese government officials, as well as I went and followed a Michigan-based business on several business meetings where he tried to promote his products, which are components for medical devices, to sell to Chinese customers. And so I got a real first-person experience and view of how those potential deals come about. So that was pretty interesting.
I was asking Bill earlier because of his background in state government. That really, a lot of the commerce depends on personal relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And especially in Asia, it does.
And
But in every country, it truly does. You know who to call, you know who to talk to, they trust you because they've seen you.
that was one of my biggest takeaways, and that was in my article that ran this morning on MLive. Was in China they call it guanxi, which means those personal relationships. And every single meeting I went to, that was just reinforced how much the Chinese really value those personal relationships when it comes to making business decisions. And so because the Chinese government is so heavily involved in business, way more so than the U.S. government would ever be involved in private enterprise, those government relationships are important in addition to the business-to-business relationships. So that's a lot of what I believe Governor Snyder was trying to accomplish, was making these good, kind of a goodwill effort to meet with the Chinese government in addition to the businesses that met.
When you were there, knowing that MSU has several thousand Chinese students, did you run into any parents, or did anybody know about MSU's relationship?
Yes, we talked about that ahead of time. I thought, how great would it be to run into some parents? Did not run into parents. However, I did run into some young people. I spoke with a Chinese journalist, a young woman, and asked her what she thinks about Michigan. And she said that, she personally has never been there, but she knows about it largely because of our universities. She had friends that were attending there. We ran into, in one of these business meetings, an individual who went to Michigan State, and for his graduate degree and had come back. So that relationship, I think, it was present. Michigan, unfortunately, as a Spartan, I wish that people would know Michigan State first, but during a roundtable discussion with some Chinese journalists, and Governor Snyder played a word association game. I say Michigan, you say first word that comes to your mind. And 2 out of the 5 or 6 answers were University of Michigan or Wolverines. So, I would have preferred Spartan.
I guess it pays to put Go Blue in a skywrite it.
I guess so.
I think Michigan State might even have more Chinese students than U of M.
Oh, it does.
But U of M has that global image, I suppose. So that does play a big role into, how the Chinese view us is our university.
Now, does Snyder's unique role, having been such a new technology computer guy in the past as a businessman and governor, did that give him a special cachet with heading the delegation there?
I think it did come up during a few discussions. I remember we met with the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, and it was a very formal meeting between the governor and him. And I sat off to the side and listened in, and he brought that up. He said, I know you as a former executive of Gateway Computer.
I
They
wonder.
did their research and they knew that, and I think there was some respect there.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Melissa Anders of MLive about her visit to China with the Snyder delegation. And a question I've had is, what kinds of deals are we talking about in terms of forging new relationships there? I guess my bias, lefty that I am, is always that I see those people doing headers off the second story in the factories building our iPhones, and it makes me uncomfortable that our manufacturing jobs. I was just reading another article the other day about, people who are working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. The working conditions in China are just execrable in many of these facilities. So it's not always good news to see our jobs going there to people who are being exploited. Are there deals that are good for us coming out of this?
Well, I think what the goal was for them, and Governor Snyder told me himself, he said, people are asking me, am I going to go over there and ink deals for X number of specific jobs? He says no, he was more concerned about the larger, broader relationships. But I think the general goal, based on what I heard at meetings, was this Michigan delegation wanted one, to help Michigan businesses export more of their products to China and in turn support jobs back at home. Because yes, China produces a lot, but they can't produce everything. For one, they don't have enough land to produce enough farmland to produce enough food for the Chinese people. So there's opportunities, and other products that they just don't produce or that we produce better. So that's one side, the exports. Another would be a big focus was to attract foreign direct investment. So they want Chinese companies who maybe are manufacturing for Asia, if they want to expand into North America and need a physical presence somewhere in North America, they want that to be in Michigan. So they want Chinese firms to come to Michigan, open up manufacturing facilities or R&D facilities and employ Michigan people. Well, at the same time, undoubtedly there's going to be Michigan companies sending some jobs over there or opening up facilities. I went to an auto parts show in Beijing, and Michigan auto suppliers were there seeking business in China, but in order to really do that, they might have their R&D and design facilities in Michigan, but it costs too much for certain types of parts to ship over there. So instead of having Michigan manufacturers build those parts in Michigan and mail them, ship them all the
Right.
way, they're going to open up their own facilities, just like Ford has their own plants. They're not shipping cars from Michigan to China. So in that case, yeah, they're going over there and hiring Chinese workers, but it's at least supporting the bottom line of Michigan companies.
When you were there, did it astonish you how many people there are and how you're not alone? I mean, I
Yes.
mean, it's
The culture shock?
a village there is 7 million people.
Yeah.
Right, right.
It was incredible. I'm embarrassed to say, but I had never heard of the city of Chongqing, China before. They have 30 million people
Right.
in their metropolitan
And
area.
it's small.
I mean, it was just incredible. The number of high-rise apartment buildings was just amazing, and the number of cranes in the air at any given moment was they're constantly building. The amount of people, the traffic was scary. I mean, people will just dart out in the middle of the street, and you have car bumper to bumper. It was just overwhelming.
What about the pollution? I know when Jim Detchen, who was the head of the Knight Center for Environmental Journalism, he has spent significant time in China, and he was just stunned. He said, they tried to live there for a year, and literally he worried about his family's health because the air was so bad in Beijing.
And it's funny you mentioned Beijing. I thought Shanghai would be worse because it's just more built up. But Beijing, it's day by day, but when our last day in Beijing, you couldn't see the tops of buildings. It was so smoggy, and it was kind of nice that it was my last day because I was ready to get back to this fresh, gorgeous Michigan air. But I had just never seen anything like it.
It's stunning, isn't it? I mean, literally, it's almost air you could cut with a knife. It's that bad. And it makes you wonder as we struggle with issues here. I mean, we seem to be doing a good job of ignoring it, but when you see things like the floods in Boulder, it's a reminder we better get busy about climate change. But when we see the kind of growth taking place in China, it's just exploding. It's very hard to think how, I mean, the pressures that's going to put on the global ecology. And during your whirlwind trip, did you see examples of did you get to see Three Gorges Dam? Any of the?
No, no, I saw a lot of insides of hotel rooms and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
meetings, but no, I did get out and see a little bit. Regarding the pollution, one thing that I found interesting was one thing they're trying to do over there to tackle both pollution and traffic is just immense government control over when and where and how you drive. Based on the number on your license plate, you can't drive certain days of the week. Um,
Oh.
yeah, so that's
And
kind
they
of
will
interesting.
enforce it
Hmm.
with
Mm.
vengeance. I mean, it's ugly when they pass laws in place. You better not mess.
Hmm.
As they make that transition from bicycle to car, that's going to put enormous pressure on the whole system. On top of which, they use coal burning in homes for cooking and for heat, and that's another. I mean, that just leads to sort of that black soot hanging in the air all over the
It's
place.
like New York City in the 60s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, really. I mean, we've cleaned up a lot since then.
We've
You're
got-
talking to somebody who used to, as a kid, go down and watch the Cuyahoga River where we catch on fire. It's like,
Instead of
hey!
fireworks, it was free.
It was sort of a free entertainment.
What was the most astonishing thing to you overall? Or a couple different things. When you came back,
Yeah.
what was the thing you keep thinking about
Yeah.
in your mind?
I'm still processing since it's only been a few days, but one was just like you said, the sheer number of people. And in Shanghai, that was my first day, my first city that I visited was Shanghai. And I looked out my hotel room, and in an American city, you see a skyline and it's one little clump of buildings, and then you see flat land or lower buildings. This was just as far as the eye could see, tall skyscrapers, and I just tried to picture all the people that must be in these buildings and all the engineering and planning and logistics. I mean, in order here in Lansing to have one building built takes years of planning and development meetings and approvals and funding and financing, and to see, just hundreds of these buildings being built in Shanghai was just hard to believe. The other thing was it was a lot more westernized than I had expected. And people were very friendly and open to me as a journalist. I was a little concerned.
Really?
People were willing to talk to me for the most part, and it was just a lot more westernized than I had thought.
We've seen this growth of cities where, I mean, the tradition has been that people leave the farms in the rural areas because there's nothing for them there. How is China dealing with its food situation? I mean, they have an enormous population to feed. What are the inducements to keep people still in the agricultural areas?
Well, what I've heard is inducements to move them out of it.
Well, that's the danger, isn't it?
Still.
And that they're building these cities, trying to push the people from the rural areas into the urban areas to promote GDP growth and economic growth, and there's been some resistance.
They've built these ghost cities
Right, right.
that people refuse to move to, or that for some reason they end up standing idle.
Right, and that's just one topic that I really didn't get to explore as much as I would have liked to while I was over there, but plan on looking into more because I just think it's intriguing as they build. Unfortunately, I missed it last year when the governor went. They went to one of these ghost cities.
Oh, did they really?
They
Oh,
stayed
wow.
in one of these brand new hotels and said it felt like they were on another planet.
Or a movie set, I would think.
Right,
Yeah.
right, because there was these brand new flashy buildings and barely any people.
There's a wonderful documentary film called The Long Train Home, and it talks about the fact that the people who've left the rural areas to come to work in the factories, they may have to travel, 1,000 miles or two to get back home, and they have their one holiday during the year where they do that. And one of the saddest things that I heard was standing in line to get your ticket, and you're not assured a ticket. It's not like you just go online and buy one. If you get shut out, you don't get home that year. They were wearing adult diapers and standing for 2 or 3 days. I mean, that just seems staggering to me. The sheer crush of people that you would see in that documentary film where they're literally all, and that's the only way that you don't leave your place in line to go to the bathroom because if you do, you don't get your ticket. I mean, that's just stunning to me. So it's not, there's a different mindset there. Were you able to sort of, did you feel attuned to the culture or did you feel removed from it?
I felt like I got to know it a little bit, but I'm not naive to think that I saw the real China. I was in, nice hotels and business offices and government facilities in the largest cities in China.
Mm.
So to say that I saw the real China, I won't say that. But I spoke to a ton of people. That was my job, to go there and talk to people and ask them and ask questions, that maybe other people are afraid to ask. And so I felt like I got to know it a little bit better, but it's such an expansive, changing, transitioning culture right now, that it's hard to really scratch the surface.
And I can't resist, but I have to know, what kinds of odd foods did you get to eat?
That was my next question.
I beat you to it.
Yeah.
Well, check mlive.com. I have a whole article with a photo gallery and video.
Aha.
Oddities. I've
Of
seen it,
oddities,
yeah.
yes. I pulled out my.
No live monkey brains, I hope.
No.
Good.
Indiana Jones. Come on.
No, I pulled out my iPhone during most meals and took photos.
Do they do that too?
Well, I asked someone if it was rude, and they said, "Oh, you're completely okay."
Okay, I
So-
was wondering if the Chinese do that,
So-
if they photograph their
Yeah.
food.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
I think some people do. A few things that come to mind. There was a large bowl of soup, and I saw some things floating in it, and one of them was a chicken foot.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's pretty common.
Yeah, that wasn't too bad. I tried eel, which really wasn't too bad.
We get a lot of eel on sushi here.
Right. One thing that I didn't try, but the governor's entourage was constantly talking about it because they had tried it on a previous trip, was called sea cucumber.
Yes, what is that?
It's a cylindrical, gooey,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
kind of just sounds like disgusting.
No
seafood.
blowfish, no dangerous things that
No,
might kill you?
No, I didn't see any of that. I think they gave us some pretty tame things, but still, it was, you know, you're not used to seeing fish with the fins and the eyes, and
When dinner looks back at you, it's always
right,
a bad movie.
right.
See, I lived with somebody from China for a year.
Oh, did you?
So yeah, I was used to seeing all those
I
things.
see.
Whoa, what's that?
To be honest, what was scarier was not quite knowing exactly what something was or trying to tackle that with chopsticks.
Oh, that's right.
That
Yeah.
was always, and you didn't want to make a fool out of yourself.
Did you
but-
practice before you go with the chopsticks?
No.
Oh, brave woman.
Are there things you would eat now back here that you learned to love when you were there?
Actually, when I was in Tokyo for a couple nights, I tried sashimi and nigiri for the first time.
Really? Oh, so you've never had them here?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
No, I always went with the safe, safer sushi options. And so now that I tried it there, I think I would like to try it here.
Well, we were talking earlier about how newspapers used to be affluent enough that they would send reporters to exotic ports of call. I remember when the Turnley brothers, the twins, used to get sent all over the
Oh,
world.
wow. South
they would do
Africa.
Beautiful
On the Pulitzer, they
photography.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just great stuff. And, that era ended, unfortunately, with the digital era and with some of the economic troubles that news organizations have had. So we're happy to see that MLive is sending you there. First of all, are there any other junkets in the offing that you know about? Or
Not that I know of, but I think I was surprised too when I made the pitch. I wasn't sure whether or not they would send me, but I think they wanted to send the message that MLive is here. We're a serious news organization, covering the Capitol, covering state issues, and we're here to be a major player, and I think this helps prove that.
this is LCC
Your
Radio.
coverage has been interesting, by the way. And, it's fascinating, and I think China is still a mystery to us.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. And I wanted to ask you a bit more about MLive because it is really the first, it started a new publication here in Lansing, but without any print to go with it. All of its other publications around the state have a print component of one sort or another. They've now acquired back AnnArbor.com, right?
Right.
Mhm.
So now you have that as well. And they have, what is it, 2 or 3 days a week that they print in Ann Arbor?
I'm not sure. I think it
Two?
might.
Sunday and Thursday, isn't it?
Yep,
I think
it's
so.
two
I think
two
so.
days.
Now, does that mean that at some point they would ever consider adding print here, or are they happy with their capital coverage and their state level coverage without having to have a physical print newspaper?
I think I can't speak for my bosses, but
Sure.
I think from what I've heard, we're happy with the online presence here, and our articles appear in print in other cities, Grand Rapids Press, Flint
Oh,
Journal.
okay. Of course,
Um,
yeah.
you know, uh, Stories of statewide interest will appear, even though they're written here in Lansing, will appear in those papers. But we have a pretty good following of readers here in Lansing that, rely on us for their news on a daily basis on our website and our mobile apps. So I think it's going well so far.
How do the Chinese get their news?
Well, they have print is still
Mhm.
there, and web is pretty big there too. I think I saw several Chinese journalists went and covered events in China, and I got to see their online news clips pretty quickly afterwards.
Looking at it, I think that MLive really is sort of inventing the future. A lot of people believe that the print publication in some ways drags down the digital because it is so expensive to continue printing. I keep saying if you went to a bank and said, here's my great idea, I want to put things on paper and hire people to run them around town and leave them at people's doorsteps, they'd laugh you out of the bank. So it's inventing this. What is your typical day like?
I don't really have a typical day, to be
Okay, that's
honest.
good.
But it is different in the sense that we don't come in each day to feed the beast, as we say, to fill the paper. And that's same for the cities where we do have print papers. Our journalists are there to report the news as we see fit, and our first instinct is to write for the web. So we get in, we see what's going on for that day, and we report the news as we see it, and publish it online as soon as possible. As
Right.
soon as we have that article and those photos or that video, we get that through, the editing process, and we put that online as soon as we can. Then, if the newspaper wants it, they will go back and take those articles from the website. So, we can write 2, 3 articles in one day, depending on how busy it is. And it's funny, people ask, what's your deadline? We don't have that
Right,
print deadline. Our deadline
right,
is now. Our deadline is 5 minutes ago. We want to
right.
get you the news first.
I was talking with Bonnie in yesterday's New York Times, I think it was. There's an article, maybe it was Sunday's. Was that yesterday? That was yesterday. It was yesterday's New York Times, an article about a operation much like yours starting in New York City, all online. With I think they have 18 reporters
Wow.
covering New York City, and they're taking a run at it to see if they can cover it in a digital way
Mm.
only. Sounded just like MLive. You might want to go
Mhm.
look it up. It's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah,
fascinating.
well, a lot of people have come up with that model. The question is whether you can execute.
Make money.
And they had the infrastructure to be able to get it started here. When you were in China, what was the time difference and how did you file there? You
Well,
were kind of on the clock 24 hours a day, weren't you?
a little bit. It was 12 hours ahead.
Ah.
So, 7 p.m. here would be 7 a.m. there the following day. It kind of worked out to my advantage a little bit. At the end of the day, 8, 9 p.m., I'd get back to the hotel room and file my stories for the day, and it would be 8, 9 a.m., here in Michigan. So it worked out quite well, actually.
I had a friend who he was a photographer for Life magazine and he was covering the civil rights movement. Back in the time, this is the 50th anniversary of the Birmingham bombing, so he was down there at that time. And he was telling me he was so glad that he had chosen to be the photographer because he'd said put in one of these wrenching days seeing all this. He'd get back to his hotel room at about 8 o'clock at night. He would take his film canisters, we're talking that kind of era. He would put them in a pouch. He would take them to the front desk. A courier would run them out to the airport, right? Said he'd go out and have dinner. He said, and as he's leaving, he would hear the ink-stained wretch in the room next door going click, 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 click. He said, I get back at midnight and I would still hear click, click, click. But you tell me now, you have to do it all.
Yeah, yeah. I had my cameras out there taking photos and video and writing all at once.
Melissa, what was the most interesting pop culture thing that you saw that you just wouldn't see in
Yeah.
this country?
I would have to say, hands down, that was at the Tokyo airport. There was an airplane completely covered in Hello Kitty. It was a Hello Kitty airplane.
Sweet.
Ouch, ouch. Well,
Love
there are
kitties.
some downsides to Asian culture.
Never. That's so
Never.
sweet. That's so funny.
There is that whole cult of young girls that do dress in very highly stylized ways in Tokyo, don't they?
Right, and I was hoping to see some. I did see some women in what appeared to me as traditional geisha attire, but I didn't have the guts to ask anybody, what the occasion was.
Well, it's a perfect transition to ask Ann Larrabee to join us and tell us a little bit more about does this mean you came home with in pockets stuffed full of Hello Kitty on the way, or
Not Hello Kitty, but there was very interesting candy in Japan.
candy? Ooh.
All sorts of strange.
And if you get addicted, I mean, when you're there, I mean, Melissa was there for a couple weeks and it's a whirlwind tour and you're going from place to place. You were there from September to September,
Yes.
and that's a long time. You became acculturated somewhere along the line. How long did it take and what is it like being Japanese? Were you there long enough to feel Japanese?
Well, I'm not sure any Westerner can be Japanese.
Is that right?
Because
Okay.
because the traditions are long-standing, the networks are very strong, and so I knew many Westerners in Japan who'd been there for 25 years and still hadn't really completely
Really?
assimilated, even though they were fluent in Japanese. There's always a little bit of standoffishness or because people are raised in these particular traditions that it's hard to become completely acculturated.
I would assume, for example, that I could never be a Texan. I would always laugh putting on a cowboy hat.
Right.
You know, I mean, so if I can't become a Texan, I don't know that maybe you
So
can.
why do people laugh at
Yeah.
Michiganians or Ganders? Or whatever?
Yes.
And the language is very complex. So there are 3 different writing systems, and then the language is different than our grammar, so it's a challenge.
So how did you get by with language? I mean, did you use translators often? Were people more acquainted with English than I might expect?
I had a little bit of Japanese, enough to get my needs met, and I learned to read enough so that I could read signs on the subway and so forth. But many people speak English in Japan. At least there's a modicum of English. They take 6 years of they take 6 years of English as they're growing up, 6 years of study. And actually, if you look at the United Nations statistics, 2 billion people on the planet right now are learning English. That's how important it is
So
as
it's
a
a
global
language
language.
of choice, especially in the business community.
Yeah, and so the classes that I taught, and I taught at 2 women's colleges, so they were all young women, and they were all very interested in learning English because that's the way they can rise in the hierarchy of their companies.
Now, is the splitting the sexes at college, is that common?
The women's colleges are still pretty robust in Japan in a way they're not in the United States, that they do have separate women's universities. The Sexism is still a problem in Japan. Young women can expect, for example, they might be able to get into a high position in a company, but typically they'll be office staff still. So there's still quite a strong glass ceiling in Japan, but that's going to change. I mean, young women are interested in moving into higher positions, and I think that's in the process of change there.
Is there any cachet to get educated in the United States and go back?
Yes, except that, as Melissa was saying, the networks are really, really important for getting a job. So if you come to the United States to study, you haven't formed the networks that you need to get a job. And that's one problem. So even though in some ways you're showing that you have deep knowledge of another culture by coming here, it can stand in your way because the relationships in companies, sometimes they go back and back to university and even before.
When you think, I mean, we had conversed over Facebook while you were there, and there are times such as today where we saw that horrific shooting at the Naval Academy. Well, no, it wasn't the Navy Yard.
Navy Yard.
And it made you, when you were in that culture, say there is something to be said for civility and for the kind of peacefulness that you can have in a culture that isn't riddled with the kind of violence that we have. Was that a shock when you were there? Did you find yourself easing into it like a warm bath, or is it?
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, civility is very important in Japan. People care about other people's feelings. They offer gifts. The reciprocity in relationships is really important. And I never heard any verbal aggression.
Really?
Never.
The whole time you were there?
The whole time I was there, I didn't
Since
hear.
you've been back,
I
it must
hear
be a
it.
shock.
I know.
Well,
Yeah.
it would be, wouldn't it? I mean, did you have difficulty readjusting when you came back here? Didn't we seem brutish, garish?
Well, loud for sure. I mean, people seem quite loud and laughing loud, and just to me, coming back, observing Americans just seem to do everything bigger. They are bigger. They take up more space. They are
Bigger homes, bigger cars.
Yeah, just bigger.
Bigger cowboy
You can see
hats.
why Michael Moore thought we should be renamed the Big One.
I became good friends with Nikki Kato, who was a reporter for Chinichi Shimbun, and she was here on a 9-month Fulbright, and she came here to be part of our MSU Victims in the Media program. And when I heard about the rules that people accept without any concern, I mean, the news is announced to you by the police, and you can't ask them questions at the press conference. I mean, they're a very formal society, it appeared to me still. And that, you really do, and people are quite willing to conform to those rules. So I'm not sure Americans could ever really become acculturated there.
Yeah, well, I just think decision making happens in a different way in Japan. For example, at the universities I was teaching, they had committees that were run by consensus. So they had to stay until everyone agreed. So that the meetings wouldn't last forever, they would make sure that they did all their politicking beforehand to make sure that they would have consensus at the meeting.
Certainly,
yeah, there's a whole different kind of way of doing things. And in fact, Shinzo Abe and the Japanese government, they're really encouraging immigration right now because their birth rate is dropping significantly.
Dramatically, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they want people to come in, but I wonder what's going to happen as companies open up to immigrants from other places and how they're going to fit into that rather tightly woven Japanese social world.
And they still haven't changed all of the ways in which you would become an equal if you did get there. There are still rules and regulations that make outside workers really second-class citizens that I think will still work against them.
Yeah, and there are many subtleties in the communication.
There was a group that I worked with in New Bedford, Connecticut, that tried to use consensus in a meeting, and they did 3-finger voting. If you were wildly happy about something, you would hold up your 3 middle fingers, right? If you were going to veto it, you had the 1-finger veto with the middle finger. So, lukewarm was 2 fingers. And my meetings would go on, and they'd have to table it and come back the next week. I mean, it is, but it's a process then where you have a high degree of buy-in. So there must be great consensus within the culture when those decisions are made.
Right, and that agreement is very, very important, that everybody is agreeing, that everybody's working together in concert is very important.
What kind of lodging did you have when you were there?
I stayed in a traditional Japanese house, so I had what's called a tatami room, and that's used for various purposes. And I slept on a futon on the floor and had a traditional Japanese bath, and I had a very, very fancy Japanese toilet, which does everything. Like the seat heats up, and
they do care, don't they?
Yeah, it has like 15 different electronic functions.
Does it have a remote control? Somebody asked me once. No, I don't think it does.
I was terrified of the thing when I first got to the house. I was afraid I was going to push the wrong button, and then I wouldn't know what was going to happen. So.
Now, see, my big fear was that Anne would come back glowing in the dark because of Fukushima. And that is sort of the downside to the kind of consensus decision making, because it takes much longer, and it also means that when there's a crisis, it's very hard to turn something around quickly. So are the people of Japan concerned? I mean, what is the level of concern about what's happening with that plant?
Yeah, about the radiation, because I think young people who had children were more concerned than anyone, because it was the children who had. People who are older thought that, well, by the time anything happens to me, I'm not going to be here anymore, because they figured those things take a long time to develop like it. So they weren't hugely worried about radiation, but they were deeply emotionally connected to that disaster. On New Year's Eve, I went with my friends Yoko and Yoichi to ring the temple bell for New Year's Eve. And so you ring it 106 times to release all your bad thoughts. And so we were standing there waiting, and I noticed that Yoko and Yuichi were shivering and that they didn't have coats on. And it's fairly cold in Tokyo at that time of year. And I said, why didn't you bring your coats? And they said, well, we sent them to Tohoku, to the people. They had sent them. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and they
to the point where they didn't have coats to replace it. Oh, wow. Oh, that's a perfect symbol of the kind of collective society that they have, where you feel responsible for each other. We would be arguing over, don't send them any aid, don't bail them out, right? I mean, what a different mindset. Did you find that appealing? Is there something that we could learn from that culture that would help us?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure because it's, centuries in the making. Japan's culture is many centuries in the making. It's hard to imagine it being transposed onto the United States, but I have to say that I have a deep, deep admiration for the gentleness and civility, as you say, and the kindness and taking care of each other that I saw there, and their connection to their ancestors. For example, when I left, Obon was going on, and that was the festival in which they go out and honor their ancestors, and they'll go to graveyards where generations and generations of their forebears are buried. So, that sense of historic connection, I really also admire very much.
Yeah, we bury somebody and just leave them.
Yeah.
It's not like the Day of the Dead in
Yeah.
Mexico or something like that.
And they really take care of their elderly. Like people my age, I'm in my 50s, and people who are a bit older in their 60s. Many of them were making decisions to go home to take care of their elderly parents who are in their 90s, because people tend to live a very long life there. And so that often when we're thinking, that we're in retirement or freedom, that we, the obligation to take care of parents who often live in the countryside. So people were having to think about leaving Tokyo to take care of their parents was a big obligation.
They have not put in the kind of social safety net for the elderly where they have nursing homes and so forth as we do, because they rely on family to do that more, and it's still difficult for them to think in terms of having to do that because nowadays young people aren't always able to go back, so it's always a challenge. We're seeing Prime Minister Abe really experimenting with a sort of stimulus on hyperdrive. Very big experiment to try to pull the Japanese economy out of the doldrums by infusing liquidity back into the system in a way that Obama must dream about at night. So far, the experiment seems to be going well. Are people confident?
Well, not the people I knew, but I tend to know people on the political left side of the spectrum, and well, they don't like Abe's militarism because they want to change the constitution to allow an expansion of the Japanese military, which was in mostly a self-defense mode. So they're very skeptical, and so they're also very skeptical about his economic policies. They tend not to trust that he's sincere. It's about his sincerity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're not sure he's sincere.
Have they had a high level of corruption in some of their leaders that has raised that kind of, is it a corruption issue?
Well, I think they see it as a kind of insider trading, I guess.
Yeah, elites taking care of elites.
So many people I knew were not so, and they're not very fond of the Tokyo Olympics coming, I have to say, because in our press, it was seen as all the Japanese were celebrating the 2020 Olympics going to
I don't think
Tokyo.
any country's ever, the people aren't really excited about it.
Right, the government likes it.
The ones that are going to get moved, they have to pay the freight.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Now, since you've been back, you've been on a hunt for real tofu.
I have.
Any success?
No.
No. No. There are so many varieties. Is that it, that you became addicted to all of the nuances of wonderful kinds of different tofu?
Yeah, there are many, many different kinds, and also the people, Japanese are very attached to freshness and a very meticulous preparation of food. They're never sloppy about it. So the food there is absolutely exquisite.
What's the closest you can come in town?
There is.
Oh, it's that bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
Oh, that's kind of too bad. So see, ignorance is bliss because I love Maru. I go out to Maru all the time. But you would just go
local businesses.
Not as good.
I have to say, once you've been to the source.
No, it was hard being gone for a year, though, I would think.
Yeah.
And happy to be home, or
yeah.
still settling in?
Happy to see my grandson and the family and my friends. So it's very nice to be home for that reason. But there are many things I miss about Japan. So I hope to go back.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it'll be fun to continue this conversation again. It's kind of an interesting look at what other people do.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of this whole line of conversation, but it's kind of fun.
It is. I do. I want to find out more.
Without having to go there, because I can't eat tofu.
Oh, you can't?
No.
It's one of those on the banned list?
Yep.
Some of us will. Some of us are gluten-free and...
Protein.
No, that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
they like I know one thing they like, and we're going to move into that, is they like blues.
Mm-hmm.
The blues.
Mm-hmm.
And rock and roll, and cowboys.
And a new guest has joined us.
Holly.
Yes.
Holly's back.
Yes, hello.
So you're going to tell us a little bit about what's happening with Blues Fest in Old Town.
Yes, exactly.
And that's going to be we hope not too chilly.
Yes, we're hoping. Right now, the weather looks like it's going to be 70s, kind of mild. So that sounds good. So we're hopeful. Fingers crossed.
And when does everything kick off, and what are the highlights that we should be looking forward to?
So it kicks off at 4 p.m. on Friday night, and then again the next day at noon. And same setup as Jazz Fest. We have our Kids Bee area again, and we're also doing, which we're very excited about, the walking tour of the history of Old Town, which starts at
Bill will
12:30
be
on
Yeah,
Saturday.
yeah, I'll be there. We had like
Perfect.
75 people last time. It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Is
got-
it the same tour?
Same tour. We're gonna do the exact same
Oh,
one.
good, good. Because a lot of people have been buzzing about it, and we're sorry
And
they
this
missed it.
this time we're gonna point out the giant turtle underneath the bridge. It must be 100 years old. It's huge.
Under which bridge? The by
The
Breaky?
Busby Bridge there.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And you have the new statue to point out now.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. That just went in.
Birchfield, or Birchfield? That doesn't sound right. Burchard Park.
Yes,
Burchard
yes,
Park.
that's it.
What are some of the highlights of the fest? I mean, who's coming in that people are just going to be blown away by? Because Blues Fest always gets some pretty good players.
I know, I'm very excited. I am new to blues music, but I did look up some of the acts, and I'm very excited for Big Lou and the Bluesville Review. I watched one of his videos, and he just seems like he just will have a great stage presence and a great personality and kind of that classic blues sound. And he's also a radio personality as well, and I'm excited to see him.
Where does he come from?
I believe he's Chicago.
Chicago.
Chicago Blues.
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Mhm.
Now, is he the harmonic?
No,
What's
the
that
harmonica
one?
guy. That is
The harp.
Sugar Ray.
He's huge.
Norcia?
Sugar Ray.
No, I think it's Norcia.
Yeah, Norcia.
Norcia.
Sugar Ray Norcia is huge, I guess.
Yes.
Quite a harpist.
So yes, he's another great one. So
And I think, how long has Blues Fest been going on now?
20 years.
20 years.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
No, we're so close. We're very fortunate. I mean, there's a big difference between Delta blues and Chicago blues and all that. So do we have a variety of different kinds of blues artists this year? Or?
Everything from what I can tell. There's city blues and country blues and electric blues, and it just keeps going on and on. This is one of the better ones I've seen. I think it fits well in Old Town because you're right in the center of the city too, and that's, a lot of the blues did come out of the city,
Oh yeah, it's a city.
Chicago.
Yeah, there's the Chicago urban kind of blues. The Delta blues is rural. That's a different kind of blues. Some of the other acts there that you can tell us about, Bill?
Nellie Tiger Travis, the Mike Wheeler Band, the full Bluesville Review is really good. Buzz and Buster.
Buzz and Buster sounds familiar.
They're from Memphis, I think. And Kevin Nichols and Blue Tuesday. I think what's nice about it is you're going to hear all kinds. And I think we're exposed to different. We're mostly northern blues. I mean, we're the city blues up here.
Do we have beer tent to go along with?
Holly.
Of course.
Of course.
Of course. And still the $5 that it's been with the 4 to 6 happy hour on Friday as well, where you get them for free.
Oh.
So definitely the time to get in there.
What's the story on the Kids Bee area? I know nothing about the Kids Bee area.
So the Kids Bee area we have, and that's a newer area that we started up a few years ago. And in that area we have an instrument petting zoo. Which is kind
That
of
I've heard about.
signature event.
Yes, yes.
And in that we have MSU Community Music School as well as Marshall Music that provide instruments and work with the kids. And then we also have a couple musicians that come in as well to show off their instruments with the kids. And there's the Road Art Museum is there with a Build Your Own Broad activity. And then we also have in that
What is the Build Your Own Broad activity?
it's a construction.
You try to make one?
Yes.
I tried to make one out of aluminum foil
Yeah, I
once.
remember that.
It was a disaster. Scotch tape does not work well, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
Don't
it's
use
a
aluminum
tricky
foil and
craft.
Scotch tape. Yeah, yeah.
Build your own road.
And it helps if you have a picture of the broad at the time too. Yes, they look
Yes.
otherwise just like aluminum foil fans. Yes. So.
Yes.
And you're going to have a riverboat taxi.
Of course, we've got the riverboat taxis that goes from 2 to 10 p.m. on Saturday, and it's only $1, so you can catch, if you're worried that parking is going to be an issue, you can park over by the city market and then just hop on the river taxi and take it down to Old Town.
Really?
Which is what happened when the city began 170 years ago or so. They used to have river taxis.
So do we normally don't, I know nothing about what goes on the river because I've really not spent any time there. So these are people that have donated their time in boats, or is this an actual river taxi service that exists in town?
It's Metro Marina. It's but it only works during the Blues and Jazz Fest.
Oh,
So just those hours during the festival, but and what's great about Lansing Metro Marinas is they're all about getting people on the river, and so they also do tours, and that's I think that their focus now is mainly doing tours where you can rent their boats or rent that kind of experience and have someone take you down the river and show you all the sights and.
Bill and I were talking about that the other day. I mean, Lansing is a river town. And I think over time, somehow we've either ignored it or neglected it. It is such a resource that finding ways to reconnect people back to that river is just wonderful. That would be great.
Now, the Blues Fest versus the Jazz Fest. I'm not a big fan of jazz, but I do listen to it. But the blues, I think it draws a different. I mean, it draws a different crowd.
Oh, sure.
It's
Yeah.
really jumping.
Yeah.
They jump.
Yeah.
They don't sit as much.
Do we have any really great singers? Any women blues artists? That's what I.
That's what I was looking for. I did not see the ones that jumped out at me as they usually have.
My old friend Jan James used to come in. She does the blues down in Chicago, and she was always very popular. I'm sorry I never got to see Big Mama Thornton and some of them.
Nellie Tiger Travis.
She'd be the one.
She's the one, yeah.
Okay. Now, Ann Arbor used to have the Blues Festival for many years.
Michael started it, remember?
Who?
Michael, your friend,
Erlewine?
Earlywine.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He was
He
involved
started
in
the
that.
first Ann Arbor Blues
Yeah,
Fest.
I used to go to that many, many years ago, back in the 60s.
He is in history as helping revive the blues in this country. Michael is. He's pretty famous for that.
Well,
Is
they
the
were
festival still
wonderful.
going on?
No.
No, and I don't know
it's
why they
small.
lost
It's
it.
totally different. It was an outdoor venue, and it was in a big park, and they don't do it at all like that anymore.
Yeah, it was Big Hippie Central.
Yeah, it was big hippie central.
And it's not hippies now. Blues are not hippies now.
No.
Of course, we don't have any hippies now. I guess we've lost them all somehow over the years. So these are an all-age kind of shows, though. Just because of the beer tent doesn't mean that you don't bring your kids, right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And of course, the festival is free. Only the actual beer tent is what costs the $5, but that you can still enjoy all the performances.
Food?
Of course. So lots of different vendors. We have barbecue vendors, crepe vendors, all kinds of different.
Great. That sounds a little bit too
Yes.
upscale for the blues. Barbecue sounds perfect. Who else do we have?
Cornbread.
Cornbread, pig's knuckles, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Some soul food down there for the blues festival would be perfect.
There's
Yeah.
always an assortment. We always try to get a little something of everything to make everyone happy.
Now, when people want to go find out more, there's a website they can go to?
Yes, oldtownbluesfest.com. So you can read up on all of our performers, find the schedule, any information you want on the river taxis or the tours, and you can find all of that there.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And so you say it kicks off at 4 o'clock on Friday.
Yes.
And how long does it run? What is it from on Saturday?
So it goes till about midnight to 12:30.
Okay.
So it goes into the night, which
All
is
right.
nice. Mm-hmm.
And then the next day?
The next day it starts at noon and then goes till the same time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing Sunday?
No, nothing Sunday.
Okay. So it's a Friday?
It's like the blues.
Well, that's, yeah. It's a nighttime kind of thing. That's
Yeah,
not
they didn't play on Sundays.
Yeah. So this is hosted again by Micah? Is
Yes.
that who's doing it? And
Yeah, this is Micah, and they're the Michigan Institute for Contemporary Arts. They do the Lansing Jazz Fest. They produce the Michigan Mosaic Music Festival, and then also have Micah Gallery in Old Town.
So things will be open
Oh, absolutely.
late into the night, so we can go to the galleries?
Yes, I know Micah Gallery will be open the whole time because we'll be stationed out of there. I'm not sure how late the majority of the venues will say, but all the stores and shops extend their hours during the festival, which is really neat.
Blues Fest, I think, is, it's that nice capstone to the fall. It's still nice warm nights if we're lucky, and it looks like we might luck out again this year. And it's really a nice time.
Of course, the week after, 2 weeks after, they have Oktoberfest with polka. They go from the blues to polka.
Some of us grew up with that, Bill.
Yeah, me too. I was
too.
talking to somebody today about it, and I said Bay City had the largest polka station at one time in the country.
Ooh. See, Frankie Yankovic was in my hometown
Yep.
of Cleveland, and my parents did what a wretched kind of music.
Sunday morning was awful.
Oh, I know. There'd be polka music on the radio. Oh,
Of
just
course.
dreadful. Yes.
Yeah.
And you didn't hear any blues. Yeah.
No.
No. Oh. Blues, a lot more fun.
Who did the poster this year?
The poster, this was the graphic design team at Message Makers, so that'd be Andy Dorr and his team over there.
Okay.
Message Maker's always been hugely involved in helping to organize all of this.
Yes, absolutely. They're always responsible for amazing design of the City Pulse insert and posters and
And the
pictures.
T-shirts. I
Yes.
always go and buy the leftover T-shirts from the previous years because they're so nice and inexpensive, and
That's
at the
a
same
good
time they're
deal.
gorgeous. Yeah, they're just beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us,
Yes,
Holly.
thanks for having us.
And I hope I see everybody out there at Blues Fest over the weekend. This is Lansing Online News Radio with Bonnie and Bill here at WLNZ Radio 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. And I hope you'll join us again next Monday night at 7 p.m. We will be back. Thank you very much for tuning in.